Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really plunging into some tricky currents, societal shifts, politics, economics. It feels like everything's moving so fast. Our source material today comes from Paul Buitink. He's a podcast maker, geopolitical expert, kind of known for, well, bridging divides, which is quite something these days. So our mission, if you like, is to pull out the key insights. How can different views actually coexist? What's the power of a story, a narrative? And crucially, what does it all mean for Europe and for you, for individual freedom?
Exactly. And we'll be connecting some, seemingly separate things of a viral video here and national policy there. It all links up surprisingly quickly. And it raises some big questions, I think, for all of us about how we see the world, what information we trust.
Definitely. So let's start with Paul Buitink himself, director of Holland Gold, creator of the Reinvent Money podcast. What stood out for me was this reputation he has for being not provocative. And yet he moves in all circles.
Yeah.
Mainstream, alternative media. He talks to everyone.
Okay, let's unpack this. How does someone actually do that? Get mainstream economists, Matthijs, Bouwman, Rob de Wijk talking to more alternative folks like Kees P, and make it productive. Seems like a real challenge.
It really does. And I think the key takeaway from the material is his approach. It's persistent, for one. Getting these people to agree isn't easy. But then it's about respect. Keeping the conversation focused on the actual content. He even apparently reviews key questions beforehand. So guests know what's coming, you feel prepared, and crucially, they might actually come back.
Okay. Preparation and respect.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? In this super polarized world we're in, what can we learn from that kind of model for dialogue? Yeah. It's interesting. And he doesn't avoid the tough stuff either. Like that debate he set up on the digital euro between Arne Wellens and the Dutch central bank, the DNB. He did it because he thought there was bullshit being spread in alternative circles, but he still voiced his own worries about the digital euro. He critiques both sides.
Right. He's not just a neutral facilitator. He has his own stance, but prioritizes the discussion.
And then there's this international podcast, Reinvent Money, featuring people like John Mearsheimer, the U.S. political scientist, realist thinker, and Jeffrey Sachs, too. I read that one Mearsheimer interview got 1 million views. 1 million. What makes these often quite controversial views get so much traction right now?
Well, I think there's clearly a hunger for different perspectives, isn't there? Especially on topics people feel aren't being fully covered, maybe, by the mainstream. Mearsheimer, he has some really controversial takes. On Russia-Ukraine, he puts a lot of blame on the West for how it started. And on Israel-Hamas, he's very anti-Western, frames Israel as like a long arm of the West, and Hamas as poor Gizans. Very strong views. But what's insightful about Buitink's handling of it is, well, he might agree with Mearsheimer's analysis on Russia, maybe respect it, but he pushes back hard on the Israel stuff, disagrees clearly. But the conversation stays respectful. It forces you and the listener to separate understanding why something might have happened from actually condoning it. That's a key distinction.
That is such a crucial distinction. And it feels like we've lost that ability, doesn't it? To just listen. People jump straight to emotion or just, preach to their own parish.
Right.
We stay in our bubbles. It's making it so hard to find any common ground.
Absolutely. Which is why that other conversation Buitink had is so interesting. With Hoogduin, this 29-year-old guy described as left-wing, they apparently used the same sources, the same information, but drew totally different conclusions.
Really?
Yeah. It just shows how facts alone often aren't enough. Your worldview, your starting point, that shapes everything.
That's a perfect lead-in, actually. Because here's where it gets really interesting. This power of images and how perception can be, perilous. I'm talking about the Dundee incident, that viral video from Scotland. A girl, looked young, with a machete and an axe.
Oh, yeah.
Shouting about her sister. Don't fucking touch my little sister.
Yeah.
Who she said was fucking 12. It was intense.
It blew up online. People like Elon Musk, Tommy Robinson, they picked it up immediately.
Exactly. And it was instantly framed, wasn't it? In a very specific way.
Yeah, straight into the mass immigration narrative. Muslim men threatening white girls. And then the calls of, where are the British men?
Right.
And if you connect that to Carl Jung's ideas, the archetypes, that girl became a symbol almost overnight. A symbol for all those girls abused by rape gangs, referencing the Pakistani gangs mainly and even bigger. A symbol for Europe threatened by radical Islam.
Like a modern Boudica or Joan of Arc.
Kind of, yeah. The image became loaded with all that historical and cultural weight. It went way beyond the actual incident itself.
But here's the twist, and this is where it gets really messy. Initial reports And then later, digging by papers like the Daily Mail, they suggested it was probably not what happened as asserted by Musk and Robinson.
Right. The details started to shift. Talk of a very young Bulgarian couple who'd lived there for years, not quite the narrative that went viral.
Exactly. The actual context, or at least a more complex one, got completely steamrolled by that first powerful image.
And that's a perfect illustration of this post-truth society idea, isn't it? It's not just about lies. It's where objective facts just don't have the same pull as, emotion, personal belief, that gut reaction to an image.
The feeling overrides the facts.
Precisely. The entire context just faded away. It became only about the girl with the axe. She turned into an icon, totally detached from the real story.
And the danger there is, well, figures like Musk or Robinson, even if the facts come out later and contradict the initial story, they might still feel the end justifies the means, use it to wake people up about where they think Europe is heading. But it's risky, right? Because if the story unravels, it can discredit genuine concerns people might have. It plays with public trust.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is how this local incident, this image, taps into much bigger anxieties. Our sources talk about the pauperization of England, economists warning about needing an IMF bailout like the 70s. France is hearing similar whispers now, too.
Wow, really? France, too?
Yeah. So you have this backdrop of economic decline, almost Dickensian conditions for some, a feeling that the British underclass is just forgotten. And in that context, an image like the Dundee girl becomes incredibly potent. It starts to represent not just English problems, but maybe the downfall of large parts of Europe.
So that Dundee story really shows how perception is shaped by these deeper fears. Which brings us back nicely to Buitink's conversation with Verhoeven. Remember, the young left-wing guy. His perspective on national identity was totally different.
Right. He was questioning things like, who are we to claim the Netherlands? Suggesting immigrants have a right to the land, too.
And he saw issues like Islamization, but sort of rationalized them. Saying things like, oh, I've never had a fight with a woman in a headscarf, or maybe the men involved feel not entirely accepted.
It's a completely different framework for understanding the same social phenomena.
Yeah, and it illustrates those concepts of anywheres and somewheres quite well, I think.
Definitely. The anywheres often highly educated, mobile, the laptop class, feel at home anywhere. Their identity isn't tied so strongly to one place. Whereas the somewheres are rooted, think Urk, Volendam. Their identity comes from that specific place, its traditions, its community.
And those two groups, they just see the world differently, don't they? Especially when it comes to defending, and national culture. The anywheres might not even see what needs defending.
Exactly. It might even feel exclusionary to them. It's like they're speaking different languages sometimes.
It really feels like that. And our material noted how many younger people struggle to even define Dutch culture. Which contrasts sharply with Paul Buitink's wife, who's South American. She apparently values Dutch traditions like Sinterklaas or Koningsdag, sometimes more than he does.
But that's a common observation, isn't it? Outsiders often see the value in traditions more clearly, while insiders might take them for granted, almost like you're just giving your country away.
Yeah.
And the source material raises a pretty stark warning here. It suggests that if the views of the laptop generation voting Green left labor, the left-wing multiculturalists, if those views questioning national claims, questioning distinct cultures, become dominant politically across Europe, well, the argument is that could lead to decline, undermining social cohesion.
Which connects to some really sensitive political issues.
Yeah.
Like the Lisa incident mentioned in the source. The murder of a girl asylum seeker suspected. There's often a real taboo, isn't there, around discussing whether certain groups might have higher rates of specific offenses compared to natives. The narrative quickly shifts to all men are the problem, or mothers need to raise your sons better. It kind of avoids confronting potentially uncomfortable truths or specific challenges.
It's tricky territory. The material does state that overall murder and manslaughter rates are lower than back in the 90s. That's important context.
Okay.
But it also acknowledges that in major cities, it is bad. It is unsafe in many places, particularly for young women. So the lived experience, especially in certain areas, feels very different from the national statistic.
Right. There's a gap between the data and the feeling on the ground, which fuels debates about things like self-defense, Wilder's pushing for pepper spray for women.
Yeah, while others warn about the risks of just having more weapons out there. It's a tough debate with no easy answers.
And underlying all this, this growing anxiety, these difficult debates, is that alarming decline in trust.
Huge.
Only 4% of the Dutch population trusting the political system. According to Buitink, it's because of the enormous mess they've made of it. That's a staggering number.
It really is, and that collapse in trust, well, it naturally makes people question the bigger structures, doesn't it, like the European Union itself.
Exactly. Which brings us to the EU dilemma. Okay, let's unpack this. The financial picture across Europe looks pretty grim. Brexit often gets blamed for the UK's problems, kind of a scapegoat maybe, but our sources point out France is also talking about unsustainable situations, maybe even IMF bailouts.
Yeah, it's not just a UK problem. The UK is facing impoverishment, high inflation, high debts, unsustainable deficits, real trouble. The argument is they need Thatcher-level cuts, but how do you cut more from a welfare state people rely on? It's politically explosive.
So against that backdrop, Paul Buitink argues for Nexit, Dutch exit from the EU, calls it the only solution. Now, that's still a minority view, politically speaking, Forum for Democracy, libertarians. But does the EU's current state make it seem, well, less crazy?
That's Buitink's point, I think, that the EU's own struggles make leaving seem less like a leap into the abyss. But there's a big question mark. If countries like France or the UK need rescuing, would the IMF even have the firepower? Especially if the U.S., its main backer, has its own massive financial problems. It's all connected.
A good point. So the Nexit call, it's either the ultimate goal or maybe a tactic, a demand for the Netherlands to push harder for opt-outs, like Denmark has.
Exactly. Reclaim autonomy and sovereignty over borders, money, nature regulations, the things they feel they've lost control over.
Buitink thinks the euro itself was a mistake, and expanding the EU to Ukraine, Moldova, Serbia, also bad moves.
Yeah, he uses this analogy, like if you have a mess at home in your family, you shouldn't make another child. Fix your own house first. He puts it down to the first law of bureaucracy. It just wants to grow, perpetuate itself, get bigger, whether it makes sense or not.
It's a critique of the EU prioritizing being a bloc on the world stage over maybe the actual identity of its member nations.
Pretty much. He points out there's no real common people, no common language. Just look at the European Parliament, all those interpreters. How can you have real unity like that?
So the argument is it should have stayed more like the old EEC, a trade bloc, a confederation of independent countries.
That seems to be the view. And the sources stress how the public often felt ignored on big decisions. Maastricht, the 2005 constitution vote, the Ukraine referendum, decisions were made despite public opinion.
Which just erodes trust even further. What about those surveys, though, the Eurobarometer, that always show high support for the EU?
Buitink dismisses those, apparently, says they're often unrepresentative, skewed towards the left, and highly educated, not reflecting the whole picture.
Interesting.
So what does this all mean? Well, look at EU countries not in the euro, like Poland or Czechia. They're doing well, strong growth, lots of trade. Or non-EU countries like Norway and Switzerland. They thrive too. It shows you don't necessarily need the single currency or full membership to succeed in Europe. There are other models.
Right. So at the very least, the argument goes, the Netherlands shouldn't agree to more common debt, like Eurobonds for defense or whatever comes next.
Especially being one of the biggest net payers into the EU budget.
And there's a feeling, mentioned in the material, that even the VVD party has shifted from representing small business owners to more metropolitan progressive liberals, leaving some voters feeling adrift.
That sense of alienation seems widespread.
Okay, so let's shift to the economic reality on the ground and what people can actually do. We're hearing about entrepreneurs, young people, actually leaving the Netherlands.
Yeah, high taxes, too much regulation, finding it hard to compete, companies struggling. It's a worrying trend.
And some are going quite far afield, Paraguay.
Yeah, it's niche, but growing. People attracted by dirt-cheap living, small government. It's become a bit of a haven for Corona skeptics, too, apparently.
Wow, it speaks to a real desire for less state, more autonomy.
I think so. A reaction against what they see happening in Europe, which leads to this idea of financial repression.
Explain that again. It's not just low interest rates.
No, it's more insidious. It's governments managing their huge debts by ensuring interest rates stay below inflation, so your savings are constantly losing value. It helps the government debt, but hurts savers.
And then there's the even scarier idea of confiscation, that old 1978 Emergency Financial Act being updated, talk of voluntary mandatory defense contributions.
It sounds like governments are quietly dusting off emergency powers just in case, which feeds into deeper anxieties.
Like Buitink's concern about nuclear war, echoing Mearheimer and Sachs.
Yeah, he's genuinely worried about it, worried about this stopping the thinking when it comes to Russia. Just demonization, no nuance. He points to Nord Stream. Initially, everyone blamed Russia, right? Even though it seemed illogical, why blow up your own pipeline?
Right.
And now, Ukrainian suspects arrested. It shows the danger of jumping to conclusions, of having only one acceptable narrative in geopolitics. It can lead us down dangerous paths.
So Buitink keeps platforming diverse views because he's genuinely worried things could get out of hand. He wants the best for the Netherlands and Europe.
That's the sense I get from the material. He sees open debate, even uncomfortable debate, as essential. Not just interesting, but necessary.
So if things look bleak and trust is low, what's the answer? How do people reclaim some freedom, some agency?
Well, the sources talk about developing parallel new systems, things like Bitcoin for payments or storing value outside the traditional system, or becoming more self-sufficient, growing your own food, communities organizing their own security. It's about building resilience from the ground up.
But isn't there a contradiction there? I remember reading about that police document identifying Hoogduin, a vegetable garden, as potentially suspicious behavior.
Yeah, that's bizarre, isn't it? Especially when other government advice tells you to stock up emergency kits with food and batteries.
Talk about mixed messages. Self-reliance is good, unless it looks suspicious.
It highlights the tension between encouraging preparedness and the state wanting to monitor everything.
So practically, what can people do beyond the emergency kit?
Well, politically, the suggestion is supporting parties that want smaller government. Less bureaucracy, fewer of those complex allowances, toes-legging, that cause so much trouble and dependency.
And on a personal level, for preparedness.
The advice is pretty old school, actually. A little bit of gold or silver within reach can never hurt.
Ah, the classic.
Yeah, drawing on history, people fleeing Nazi Germany, people in countries with unstable currencies. Tangible assets have always been a fallback when trust in the system evaporates.
Okay, so we've covered a lot today. Erosion of trust, polarized dialogue, economic fears, this squeeze on individual freedom. It feels like a lot of pressure building up.
It really does. And the
Yeah.
discussions, the examples we've looked at, they really hammer home the need for critical thinking and for being willing to hear different views, even ones we really disagree with.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We've talked about narratives, identity, practical steps. How do these big trends feel in your own life, your own town or city?
Yeah, does it make you think differently about your finances? About the news you consume? About how you talk to people with different views?
And in a world that might be heading towards more division, maybe even gated communities, as the source material hints, what's the way forward?
Is it all about demanding change from politicians? Or is it more about building things ourselves, these parallel systems, reclaiming that agency from the bottom up?
What action, maybe big, maybe small, does this deep dive make you want to take? Or perhaps just rethink? Something to mull over.
Definitely food for thought.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it sparks some thinking and encourages you to stay curious about the complex world we're navigating. Until next time.